Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, listeners. I'm back with another episode of Coffee Chats with Aisha. We are continuing our discussion on entrepreneurship, specifically unpacking the ethics as Muslimas. Listeners, you're going to be taking away reflections on the ethics of entrepreneurship, diving deeper into the world of content creation, digital branding, and more. In this insightful episode, we dive deeper into the ethical dimensions in this digital realm that we live in specifically. Our guest, Assia from the Mizaan, shares her personal journey, emphasizing the intersection of faith, content creation, while also addressing the unique challenges and opportunities faced by Muslim entrepreneurs. Listeners, you're going to gain valuable insights into maintaining authenticity, navigating partnerships online, and contributing positively to the evolving landscape of digital media, all while upholding the halal business practices. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Assia. How are you doing today?
Walaikum salam, Aisha. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. How are you doing?
I'm doing super, super well. I know, as you can tell, there's a bit of a time difference, so I appreciate the flexibility of you coming on. I'm really excited about today's conversation. I think it speaks volumes to sort of the landscape that we live in today, to sort of find out, what does business look like? What does entrepreneurship look like? And how can we balance every single thing that's out there? Before we dive into the questions that I have for today, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Who are you? And sort of like explain your background.
It's so funny because every time I get asked this question, I get shy. I don't know why. I've been doing this for quite a while now, but you know how it is. So my name is Assia. I'm mostly known online as the Mizaan, which is a page I started on Instagram first, 4 years ago, almost now. SubhanAllah, time has been flying. Yeah. And my goal with the Mizaan was to have um a page that was dedicated to Islamic lifestyle. I always thought that Islam was more than a religion. So for me, it was important to have a space where we would really see it as a way of life. And I just didn't find myself, I didn't relate to the pages that we would see mostly on Instagram. So it was either modest fashion blogger who were dedicating their content to fashion. We had reminders account that were very impersonal. I just needed someone that wasn't media, that wasn't just about fashion, just someone like a normal person that would talk about anything as a Muslimah. And because I couldn't find it, I created it, and alhamdulillah, it has become a career. And I then started to create content on other platforms, and yeah, I guess the rest is history.
Wow, subhanAllah, I love the fact that you noticed a gap and you sort of filled it, for
Yeah.
the sake of Allah, and sort of putting yourself out there in terms of mirroring what you wanted to see out there. Because I think, that being said, if you were looking for it, I know I've been looking for it. Like, I'm sure there are other people out there looking for it as well. And
Yeah.
why not like serve as that example, instead of them perhaps looking elsewhere for that sort of content and relatability in that regard. And you spoke about this being your career, which is super exciting, kind of like a different career in that, didn't exist, I think, even like 5, 10 years ago, really,
Yeah.
in terms of pushing this out there. So I'm really excited to dive deeper into your own personal journey when it comes to these talking points. Before we get into all these questions, a fun question that I ask all my guests at the beginning of the episode, just to sort of stick to the branding of this. Do you like coffee? And if so, do you have a specific like go-to order that you have always?
So I do love coffee. I wouldn't say I'm a huge coffee drinker. Like I drink coffee every now and then in the morning. If I go out, then I love grabbing a coffee. And honestly, I'm a pretty simple person. I feel like it fits with my branding to say that I will always go for either a latte or a cappuccino. Most likely a cappuccino, to be honest. Yeah, just like simple, but with a little bit of softness, I would say.
Mm. Oh my God, I love that softness. Ooh, sounds so good. It is bright and early here, so I was like, oh my God, coffee would have sounded great. I don't do too much caffeine because it does, not let me go to sleep on time in the night, but I have to be careful. But I do love a good latte sometimes.
Yeah, but I would
Um,
say right now I have tea. So, but because
oh,
it's almost nighttime, so it didn't feel
yeah,
right to drink coffee right now.
absolutely. That makes so much sense. Well, First sort of talking point that I have is just why don't we dive deeper if you don't mind? Can you share your personal journey as a Muslim entrepreneur in this world of content creation, digital branding, and then the second component I have is how did Islam and your deen and faith influence your approach to entrepreneurship as well?
Yeah, so I really love this question. I am someone who has always been passionate about entrepreneurship. I've always had so many ideas, and it always like started the same way. Like I would notice something that I was needing or that other people needed, and I was like, well, entrepreneurship is a great solution for that because you put your creativity and everything that you have in your mind into action, and then you basically kind of help people in a way. So that was something that has always been very much there. I started my first entrepreneurial project. It was 5 years ago, I think. I solo traveled to Indonesia and wanted to create an ethical home decor brand. Because one thing as well that I should have mentioned, I guess, in the introduction is that I care a lot about sustainability, and that was something that is it is a very important part of the Mizaan as a whole. So I wanted to create this brand, and then COVID happened, and everyone's lives changed. So it's always been there, and I think when I COVID hit, and then we were all stuck at home. That's when I created the Mizan, and that I didn't it would be a lie to say that I didn't want this page to grow and maybe one way or another make money out of this because I had so many ideas. I knew that I wanted to work with specific Muslim brands and, just like, yeah, basically make a living out of this because I knew the amount of work that I was going to put into it. But I wasn't very sure how because, as I said, most people that I was seeing online, like in terms of content creation, it was like modest fashion influencers, food influencers that were very specific, and I was so broad, and I was also talking about Islam. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to do what I know how to do, which is remain authentic and be myself. Islam is has always been so important in my life, but I grew up in I grew up in France, first of all, which we all know that France is. It didn't used to be that way, but nowadays it's hard to be Muslim here. So that's one thing. Like I've always been very close to my faith, but I was growing up in a Western country where Islam isn't the majority. Like not everyone is Muslim, and more specifically, my friends, none of them were Muslims. Like even to this day, my best friends are not Muslim, and so sometimes I felt like I needed to find a community that would understand that I grew up in the West, so I have hobbies and things that you most likely see in the West, maybe, but also like I truly loved Islam. And so when I created the page and I started like seeing it grow and started, partnerships and working basically as an influencer, I thought, okay, this is now the time to really think about this strategically and see how this can all cross together. And that's when I started like really getting interested and educating myself on how you do business in Islam and the ethics of it all. And yeah, now that's something that I try to share as much as possible on the page. And, even with the brands that I work with, I'm very picky and I just there's a lot of responsibility, when you brand yourself as a Islamic lifestyle influencer, you want to make sure that the partnerships that you have, the things that you shared are aligned.
Hmm.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I have ADHD. I ramble a lot, so please do let me
No,
know.
no, it makes so much sense. And speaking of that, like component of being picky, I think that's some people don't consider that. And so my
Yeah.
next question here is like, what other ethical considerations in the world of like Islamic ethics, or what do you need to keep in mind, or what do you find yourself keeping in mind in this world of entrepreneurship, especially when you're navigating diverse audiences, diverse meaning like
Yeah.
Muslims on different like Muslims on different journeys, and then also just different ethnicity, like just so many just diversity online. How do
Yeah.
you kind of navigate all of this, and what do you consider, and what considerations are top of mind for you?
Yeah, so I think what made it easier for me to get into this and figuring it all out is that before actually doing the page and before COVID, I was working as a social entrepreneur coach. So I would be exposed to people from very different backgrounds with different ideas, with different cultures. And obviously you are going to adapt the way that you talk to people and the way you advise people, because they not everyone has the same, yeah, the same lives, the same experiences, and it's important to have that into, like, keep that into consideration. My main the one of the things that I really try to keep in mind as much as possible is that when you are an Islamic lifestyle influencer, your demographics are going to be very different from what you expect. I'm based in France. I create content in English, but most of my audience, and I know I'm not the only one, because obviously we try to share tips between other influencers, and most of our audiences are based in India. And that was something that at first I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why it's mostly India. And then well, it just kind of all makes sense. And when you think about this, you're like, okay, I know, for example, that the cost of life here is much higher than it is in India, and even what I earn is much higher than what Indian earns. And it's like, okay, when I'm going to share a product, I need to have that in mind. Like, I need to justify, and for it to make sense to cost this or that price. That's just, I feel like that's the first thing to consider, as like I would say a proof of respect. But then also, it's not the only part of our audience, so that's something that I always say. It's about balance. You try to just have a little bit of everything for everyone, just to, yeah, be respectful to the diversity of the ummah. So that's the first thing that I really try to take into consideration. And then, generally speaking, obviously there's the, like, making your own research when it comes to a brand that reaches out. Especially with everything going on these days, you don't want to promote something that might support a genocide. I hope I'm
Mm-hmm.
allowed to say that on your podcast.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
and yeah, so it's so important to make your research on that. Actually, I do have an anecdote, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. No, please do. Go for it.
It's I received an email. It was, I think, maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And it was this guy saying, I would love to invite you in our retreat in Costa Rica. It's like all sustainable, and it looked amazing. And then I looked at their Instagram page, and the first post is a woman that I think she was a travel influencer who was also invited there. And she said, oh yeah, that retreat was created by 16 Israeli friends. And obviously, I hear that and I'm like, okay, it doesn't mean anything. You can be Israeli and not be Zionist. But I just wanted to make sure about, like, what I was getting myself into. Turns out they, like, blatantly supported Israel, and like had no respect for Palestinians. So I just, like, reach out to a few other influencers. I was like, you guys, you need to be very careful with the brands that you decide to work with, because sometimes they know, like, why would Israeli people reach out to me, a Muslim influencer? And it's like, okay, I need to make my research, make sure that I don't influence my audience in a negative way. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing that I really keep in mind is sustainability. I feel like that's very niche in the Islamic community, like Muslim community. And for since the beginning, that has been kind of my mission, to democratize the conversation, and for people to educate themselves. And it's like it's still hard, because sustainable products are usually more expensive, which gets back to my first point. But then at the same time, it's like I'm trying to teach why it is more expensive, and then to deconstruct every stigmas that we might have around sustainability. So it's important for me to work with brands that, either really encourage you to be more sustainable and mindful in your daily life, or brands that really push you to become a better Muslim. Obviously, with
Mm-hmm.
what I do, I feel like that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. SubhanAllah. I love it's so refreshing, and maybe it's I don't I'm not in that world as much. I do touch on a few sort of components of that in my 9 to 5, but it's really refreshing to hear about all these sort of considerations on the back end. I don't think about that in terms of the influencer side, or just even those who are online. I'm like, what goes on in sort of those considerations, those talking points, like the intentionality is really, subhanallah, something to applaud you and others who do have this sort of very keen mindset when it comes to what you're saying yes to, what you're saying no to, and obviously having a why, always having
Yeah.
that why. So subhanallah, like that's really, really cool, and really refreshing to hear about. And so, diving deeper then in that space of digital like presence and things like that, have you faced any unique challenges? Or perhaps, opportunities. I always say, like, we love celebrating wins on this channel. So, opportunities in building your brand, specifically like your identity as a Muslimah, how has that shaped your, content about, or perhaps, lighted and enlightened those challenges and opportunities?
When I started, as I told you, I knew where I was going, and it's funny because compared to what I've just said, it's like it's really easy to make a lot of money on social media, and me being really sticking to my values means that I do like not reply to certain opportunities because they don't align with them, but it's like for me, the reward that I get from sticking to my values and influencing, at least as much as I can, influencing my audience positively is something that I find so much more satisfaction in than just earning a lot of money. But I would say I remember when I started after like I think it would probably been a year after starting the account. I started receiving emails from like brands that were pretty big in the Muslim community. I'm thinking Hot Hijab, I'm thinking Muslim Pro, things like that. I've known and been using for such a long time, and it just was so surreal for me. Not because I didn't think that I didn't fit in, but rather because I knew I was bringing something different. Um, like I know that a lot of people, Muslim people, do not talk about how important it is to protect the planet, and because they're not as glamorous, as like, and it's not me despising modest fashion influencers. I love some of them, like I do follow them, but it's like I feel like yeah, it wasn't as glamorous and as how do you say that? Bankable, I guess, like, oh yeah, how is she going to sell my product if what she talks about isn't her life because I'm trying to keep my life pretty private and isn't like showing like exposing herself as much as other people would. But alhamdulillah, it's been so cool to see brands starting to reach out, and then the more you grow, obviously the more people trust you and see the value in your work. What I truly appreciate is that the brands that reach out and feel like their values align with mine, they they typically say we love the amount of work and intention you put in your content. And very often I try to create content that doesn't necessarily work with the algorithm, but content that I feel like is truly meaningful and can really have a positive impact. And I think at the end of the day, this also increased the trust of my audience, but also from brands. So that has been, I feel like, very yeah, a very cool thing, when you see your page grow and people just recognizing it as like a page to follow and to support is just it's very fulfilling.
Subhanallah, alhamdulillah. That's really awesome and amazing to hear. And that you're like, you put out content, and this, I think I have a question here about authenticity and what that means and how it's important. But I love how authentic you are and you stay true to yourself. And that being said, like, you don't per se care about meeting a certain quota or meeting an algorithm or just doing what will get viral and get yourself out there, but you're really being
Yeah.
particular and intentional and authentic about what content you're putting out there. And so that being said, I would love to kind of pick your brain a little bit more about just like, how does entrepreneurship align with, and or how do you make sure your entrepreneurship aligns with halal principles, like just with with staying within the bounds of Islam, and particularly in this fast-paced, unpredictable world of digital content. How are you making sure, like, what you're doing is right, is correct? And I know that like gets scary sometimes, but I would love
Yeah.
to hear.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Sometimes it's scary because you as I was saying earlier, you know that you have a responsibility. And I was actually talking about this with Rena from Din and Chai. I think you did have a chat with Rena. Yeah. We were talking about this on my podcast where we were both talking about our experiences as Islamic lifestyle influencers. And we were like, sometimes the responsibility gets a lot because we don't claim to be, we're not scholars or imams or like, and we don't, I mean, Rena, she is incredible. I always tell her, you are so much more like, I have so much admiration for her, and I feel like we are very similar in many ways, but we don't exactly create the same type of content. And yeah, I have always been very transparent about me being just a normal Muslimah, wanting to share her journey. But despite that, you know that people are going to, are going to trust you and look up to you. So I think one thing that I do to really just make sure that everything that I do remains, or at least like pleases what well, pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that I hope he watches me doing this and he's like, you're doing great, is always remind myself first to check my intentions regularly. When I get to new milestones, I'm like, okay, this is huge. This is something that I've been thinking about and I've been working hard towards. But now that we hear just thank him first because he's the one who chose you to do this. And the page changed my life in so many ways as well personally. Like my life has nothing to do with what it used to be, subhanallah. So to thank him first, and then to always remind myself that I'm lucky that he's hiding my sins, and that people online, they're looking at me, they're like, oh, she has it all together. I don't, I'm like, and just, yeah, just make sure to check my intentions and always question myself. And the second thing that I do is to make sure to not promote excess in any way. That's why it's called the Mizaan. The Mizaan means balance in Arabic. And it was always about just being right in the middle. And as you said, social media it gets a lot. It's very overwhelming. There's a lot of content, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of everything. And then you see people creating a lot of content on a lot of products, and I feel like it gets into a vicious circle. And in Islam, we know that we're not supposed to do anything in excess. And yeah, when I create content, I try to have this in mind, and that's why I don't do, again, a lot of partnerships. I don't feel like I overflow my audience with content. It's just important for me to, and also just, yeah, again, as this responsibility, I feel like I always say, don't spend too much time on your phone, don't spend like too much money on clothes and stuff like this. So it's important for me as well to apply my own advice. Clothing and everything is fine, but one thing that I do is that I work too much, and I know that I don't have a good work-life balance. And so especially considering that my work is also very related to Islam, and so I always try to remind myself that Islam is not work. My religion is not work. It's literally my deen. So it's important also to differentiate that. And yeah, that these are things that I try to always remind myself in order to keep things as halal as possible. In addition to what I told you previously, like being very careful with the brands I work with, the language that I use, a very a very common topic as well is music. Um, it creates a lot of debate online. I've ever Since the beginning of the page, I've never used music, and I am a music lover, and I'm working on this myself, but I know that online you need to be considering those things, and so yeah, I try to always challenge myself and make sure that it's important to listen to feedback, like be able to take a step back and see what is actually useful and caring and what is just pure criticism, and I try to detach myself from the second part. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. I love it. I love how nuanced and sort of careful you are in navigating and just being online is such a crazy thing. And it comes with a lot of responsibilities. And if you're not careful, it's easy to get lost in the world of just making money and losing your identity and your sort of your beliefs in Dean, because I've seen different scenarios, right? I've seen different stories that unfold online,
Yeah.
um, as you push it into the world of content creation. So it's really heartwarming to hear that you are very, very grounded and rooted in this
Alhamdulillah, I
in
try
this
to be.
Deen.
I try to be.
Inshallah.
But
And it's always a journey, right? It's always a journey, and
yeah,
you have to always turn to Allah and ask Him for help and guidance as you navigate anything, and especially navigate the online world. So that means that you kind of said a few different things that I wanted to dive deeper into. You kind of talked about, having that balance when you talk about content, right? And you talk about some of these principles that you embody, that you champion online, moderation, sort of like not like shopping in excess, and
yeah,
sustainability. Some of like these talking points that obviously stem are upheld highly in the Deen, but kind of perhaps sometimes contradicts with this online uh, digital landscape,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
how do you strike that balance of what content you're putting out there?
Oh,
Yeah, staying true to your own religious beliefs, but your sort of personal consumer beliefs, like, and then obviously trying to make money. I mean, there's so many different components here. So how do you what kind of content are you putting out there, and how are you balancing what you're sort of exposing your diverse audiences to?
yeah. It's definitely a challenge. I'm not gonna lie. You know, it's obviously the thing with social media is that you're necessarily going to compare yourself, and I think comparison can be healthy. It's funny. I wrote about this not too long ago, and I was like, I used when I was so I'm turning 30 in 3 days, which is still mind blowing to me that my 20s are over. But I was reflecting upon them, and in my in my early 20s, I would compare myself a lot and be so hard on myself. And subhanAllah, I actually started a YouTube channel when I was 19, and I didn't kept it up, and now I have a YouTube channel. I create content, and I've been doing so for 4 years, and it's subhanallah, I'm saying alhamdulillah because I'm not sure I would have been able to like manage everything mental health wise, because I didn't have the confidence required, and I would have compared myself a lot, but in a negative way, oh, they are doing better and I'm lame, basically. Right now I'm just saying, okay, they're doing better and I want to be like them, they inspire me. And if I don't feel that way, then I just don't follow the person, or I don't look that much. It's like preserving yourself online. So obviously when you're a content creator, you are going to compare how others are doing or performing. You're going to compare your stats as well. I feel like not necessarily because you're in a competition, but just so you know what you should aim for. And obviously there's sometimes a frustrating part when you see people that started more recently, but because they've been doing content that is good for the algorithm, are growing so fast. A very simple example, and it's just on my page only, is that I did I think it was probably about marriage or something. Marriage is like the century crisis our in our community. um I did this something about marriage, and it got like, I don't know, like 100K views, more than 100K views, maybe. I don't remember if it was a million. There, a lot of views, then I created a series of reels that was all about it was called a no to Palestine, and my aim was to every day share an aspect of the Palestinian culture. I was like, let's take a different narrative, and instead of making people feel guilty and forget that we're talking about human beings, they just showed the beauty of their culture. And I'm not Palestinian, so it was like discovering with them and seeing that these videos were not doing as many views as something very easy such as talking about marriage was very frustrating to me. And what I do to to answer your question, what I do to find balance is just trying to diversify the content, and even when I do things that work better with the algorithm, I really try to stay true to myself and my emotions and how I feel. So typically when I would talk about marriage, I would share my experience and say, hey, I'm not married either. It's yes, it's hard at times, but like let's put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like very positive mindset and just building tawakkul. This is something that I believe in, so it's easy to write about it. I think like also this is over the past 4 years, that has been a huge part of the identity of my brand, just long text where I share just how I feel, and I felt like honestly, when I meet people in real life or even online, when I see messages, they talk about the page, they always say it's so relatable, and that is the best thing someone can tell you, it's like I needed to hear this. I feel less alone. I never thought someone thought the same way as me, and it's just very rewarding. So yeah, I just try to have like different types of content. Typically, I would just have like there are some type of content that are part of the brand, like the notes to self. It's like yeah, random just thought that I write and like connected to Islam, obviously, and in life situations that I've recently been through or that I've been thinking about. Then we have more lifestyle oriented ones, which could be like sunnah, beauty, sunnah tips, things like this. And then we have series, which I love to create as well, like the Palestine one, or recipes inspired by the sunnah, just trying to, I think, basically about every area of your life. So relationships, finance, health, everything. And then I try to create content around it. Sometimes it's branded, sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's algorithm friendly, sometimes it's not. But I'm trying to also make it fun for me. I wouldn't like my page to not be a safe space for me anymore. So
Mm.
yeah, that's how I would answer. Yeah.
Wow, I love it. SubhanAllah. And then speaking of like, being very mindful and diversifying your content, I wanted to, in that previous question, what stuck out to me as well, you talked about this, but I wanted to kind of dive deeper on your understanding of how you're navigating collaborations and partnerships, because as you mentioned, in the age of social media, influencer marketing has become such a powerful tool. In my master's degree, I studied marketing management, so I know, influencer marketing for several different brands is
Yeah.
very, very top of mind and top of key. And what we're seeing now is Muslim brands are obviously tapping into influencer marketing as well. And what
Yeah.
I personally have found is I feel like there's, for me, a bigger moral dilemma when it comes to navigating Muslim brands
Yeah.
than non-Muslim or just your any old whatever brand. Of course, staking true to your ideology about which brands to boycott. But aside of that, like any brand that approaches you, I feel like I have less standards and expectations for, but I find myself in a moral quandary when it comes to Muslim brands. And so would love to kind of hear your thoughts about how you're navigating collaborations, partnerships in a way that aligns with your values as a Muslim entrepreneur. But what happens with the Muslim brands?
Yeah.
What goes on in your head when you do consider a Muslim brand partnership or collaboration?
Yeah, I was very excited about this question as well because I told you I work I worked as a entrepreneur coach, so I know I did the same degree as you did actually. So it's something I'm very familiar with. I worked in startups. I worked before and I worked in marketing before. So I've been on that end that I like now I still work as a freelancer. I don't do influencer marketing because it's weird for me, to it's weird to be on that side when I'm also an influencer. But it's hard. I've actually did kind of a rant on stories. I think it was last month. Because my experience has been that it's actually easier to navigate partnerships with non-Muslim brands than it is with Muslim brands, for different reasons. The main one is the price or the rates that you are going to talk and discuss with the brand. A lot of Muslim brands, I don't like generalizing, but let's say a lot of Muslim brands, they I understand that not everyone has a budget, but you cannot also expect someone that is going to spend hours creating content and brainstorming ideas and bringing you an audience that is pretty big that you wouldn't have otherwise, and expect not to pay the service. It's as you said, influencer marketing has become very popular. It's just another way of advertising. I know brands that don't do influencer marketing at all, because for them it's more interesting to do ads on Facebook and stuff like this, and they're like, yeah, it's just not a good return on investment when I work with influencers. I what I've seen is that a lot of brands, they would reach out. Sometimes they say, we don't do paid collabs, we just want to send you products and you create two reels on them. I'm like, you guys, this is, I feel like this is kind of unfair, you know. Even actually from an Islamic perspective, I understand that some influencers, they are taking advantage of their status, you know. I've seen influencers doing pretty much the same thing as I do, um, having rates that are 2 to 3 times higher than mine, you know. And I'm guessing they don't get the partnerships with Muslim brands either, but most likely they work with other brands. I find it hard, you know. It's hard to I was actually discussing this with other Muslim content creators, and we were all facing the same situation. It's like you have first the first limit that you have is that when you have a very international audience, you have to consider, as I said earlier, the price and based on where you live, but also just like shipping fees and stuff like this. So when you're a brand and you're based in the US, for example, it's you know, it's like I really have to think before reaching out to that influencer. And then yeah, when it comes to price, it's personally I am very open to negotiate. I feel like, especially when they're small businesses, because I'm so picky, if I see a small business that I think is very promising or that is just starting, but I love their products, I'm always going to be able to negotiate, at least like even just starting with affiliation, for example, like working on an affiliate basis. And then, you know, the more you share the brand, see it grow, the more you can consider another type of collaboration. But when it comes to other brands, and actually it's funny story. A few weeks ago, I received a message from a brand that I remember seeing when I started the page. So I had like 0 followers at that point and was like, maybe one day I'll work with them, you know? Um, they have the same amount of followers that I have. And they reached out and they were like, but obviously the engagement rate is very different, because when you're a brand, you don't get the same interactions with your audience as you do when you're an influencer. So they reach out and they're like, we love your page and we would love to send you a product, but we don't do paid collabs. And I know that this brand is very successful. I mean, they've been around for at least 5 years, you know, and it's like, so, I mean, if this is my job, you know, or even a part-time job, and I'm hoping to make an income out of this, do you really think that a free product is going to help me with that? And yeah, a lot of Muslim people, that they forget about this, and they would tell you that we're brothers and sisters. Can you help me out? Yeah, but what about you? Like, are you considering the amount of work that I'm going to put into creating content for your product? You know, and this is a discussion that is sometimes hard to have. You know, you're like, what do I say to this person? But the way that I do it is always very respectfully. I feel like this is just important, not to, you know, to diss anyone or to be like, yeah, just despising people for being mindful of their budget, or not considering that influencer marketing is such a good investment, but expecting people to promote your product when we don't really get much in return is sometimes kind of I don't feel like that's really yeah, I feel like that's not really respectful. And Islamically speaking, that I think that as when you don't show respect to other people or their work, or you know, trying to support them as well, obviously you should question yourself. But I wouldn't say it's most people. Alhamdulillah, I've still been able to work with great brands, and also it's always great to see people discovering these brands. You know, it's like you've been part of their stories, and seeing them grow is great. But I would say it's definitely more difficult than it is with non-Muslim brands, because influencer marketing is so common these days for non-Muslim brands that most likely they're going to ask what your rates are. You're going to say, yeah, I this is what I do, this is my package, and they're going to be like, yeah, let's go, you know. So yeah, I still have to crack the code when it comes to this.
Hmm. I know having those conversations are so tricky, and I love how honest and raw and transparent you were in terms of just like navigating the two. And it is a, like you said, it's your career. It is, you know, this is what you do. This is your full-time job. And um, it's I think generally though, that topic of financial stability and just making an income is super taboo
Yeah,
in not in Islam, but just the culture, right?
yeah,
In how we talk about it online.
yeah,
I think I remember recalling like watching one of your videos about budgeting and your investments. How do you go about like divest investments, and what do you do with your
yeah,
money? And I was like, that's so refreshing. I'm not on social media. I think I saw it on YouTube. I don't know where I saw it, but I was like,
yeah.
this is so, you don't really hear that. You don't really hear it from a Muslim person. You hear it perhaps on another channel that is all about financial
Yes.
whatever planning and things like that, but you don't necessarily hear such talking points from a Muslim. And so I think generally, like we should have so many strides when it comes to just talking about financial planning generally
Yeah.
as a talking point in our uh, communities online. But I love, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure that's so nuanced and so complex when you have those conversations with those brands. And it's, inshallah, like you get what you're meant to get. And if you don't land
Exactly.
it, and if it doesn't make sense for you to have that, then I think it's selfless on you to be able to say no. It's not selfish, because yes, it feels icky that like you're saying no to a Muslim brand, but you know, it you sometimes have to say no, and that's for the betterment
Exactly.
of your own.
Exactly. And I remember when I did the rant on Instagram, I received a few messages from other Muslim content creators that were like, "Thank you so much for speaking out," because this has been, obviously this isn't something that you hear a lot. And to be completely honest, when I was saying sometimes you compare yourself, and when your account starts to grow, especially in that niche, the people that do have the same amount of followers, or that are like, yeah, doing pretty much the same thing. um I don't see that many other Muslim influencers collaborating with Muslim brands, and I think there's a lot of um it's normal to question it, and it's like, um at some point, I remember saying this in the story. I was like, if you decide to reach out to an influencer, or if yourself have a social media manager, that's because you know how long it takes to create content. So you know that, like, the time that you're going to invest in the content creation is the time that you can be doing something else to earn more money. So how can you expect someone to do this for free? Especially that it's not just the content creation. Again, you're bringing your audience, and there's trust involved. When I'm going to share your product to my audience, my audience trusts me with the products that I share. And I feel like that's, yeah, again, not really really fair. But I thank you for thanking me for the transparency. One thing that is so important, I think, is, yeah, to talk about those things. There's no taboo in Islam. There's a way to talk about things, for sure, but we should be able to open those conversations. It's not like we're like naming anyone, or we're trashing anyone. It's like we're stating facts, and if we don't do this, that it's never going to change, and people are not going to be challenged and think differently. So, and I think it's important, to work as teams. Like, if I also do think, I'm not gonna lie, I also do think that certain influencers, they yeah, obviously that they are in the, I told you, it's very easy to make money, and so, when you see some rates, it's crazy. And it's like, oh, okay, that is a lot. And from an Islamic perspective, again, you need to be right in the middle. And are you putting yourself at that price because you think you're somehow famous? And it's tricky, but at the same time, yeah, you need to know your worth, but you also need to be balanced. So, and yeah, I feel like a lot of brands, they would say that, it would be like, yeah, but you're too expensive, and as you said, sometimes you just need to tell yourself, no, I'm not. Like I know how, like, what my work is worth, and I don't think I'm too expensive. I know some people are, but I don't think I am. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can relate a little bit. Just like I'm just starting off sort of this channel that I have. It's been just a few months young, and but on the side, I've been a photographer. Just I don't have social media. So just my clients are very word of mouth. But I always have, especially with like close people, it's like an awkward conversation about my price point, my rates for just being a photographer, and it's really challenging for myself to have to have those conversations about what the price point that you're paying me for my hourly rate goes into all these other things that when you add it all up, it's just a simple like hourly rate. You know, you are, and it's sometimes like you said, it's easier to have those conversations with my non-Muslim clients for their portraits, family portraits. They don't question the why. But sometimes having those in Muslim spaces, it's challenging to kind of like prove your worth. And it's,
Yeah.
I don't know what
Yeah.
it is, but subhanAllah.
I, I think maybe, I'm not sure, but when you were saying your story, I was thinking maybe it has something to do with the importance of charity in Islam, and like the importance of doing good, and yeah, being selfless. But I mean, uh, people in Islam were doing business. It's not like there's a fiqh of entrepreneurship and business, and it's like, and trade. So like there are rules for that. This is something that we do. It's not just like, yeah, let's give everything to everyone and just being completely selfless. Otherwise, we would no one would be where they are. So yeah, it's I think there's also still a lot of work to be done for people to recognize influencers, content creators, as like being a proper job. Um, I think, I was guilty of that before, I would say, before being a content creator myself. And when I started doing like content on Instagram and YouTube and the podcast, I was like, creating content is a lot. It takes so much time, especially if you're doing everything yourself, because and being an entrepreneur in general, if you are starting, you are going to have to think about absolutely everything. You're going to have to manage your admin, your finances, your marketing, your product production, and it's like you have all those things in mind. And obviously it's a lot. So a lot of people forget about that and forget that influencers are entrepreneurs that need to, like, manage everything. So there's still I'm hoping this will change. We see more and more Muslim influencers growing, so maybe this is going to, yeah, to change over time. But yeah, maybe that's the reason. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And I think I myself, coming off just like, grad school and navigating like full time myself, I think I always struggled and felt guilty with this concept of wanting financial independence and stability.
Mm,
Um, because and like you said, it's not in Islam that it's like controversial to have, right? Like there were entrepreneurs and people you hear in the seerah, like they were well off, and
yeah,
I think it dawned upon me recently that it's okay to very much have these financial goals for yourself as long as you're going about it the right way, and then
exactly.
not having that mindset of like, I did this. It was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessing
Yeah,
and his like he did this for
yeah,
me. Um, and if you have these intentions, things like that, then it shouldn't be an issue. And I think
yeah,
that was the biggest thing that I had to overcome, because you don't hear about it in maybe the lectures I attend and the things that are talked about online.
yeah,
But so it was just such a huge thing internally where I was like, I felt icky wanting to, have these lofty, financial goals and
yeah.
financial independent things that for myself was important. And I just didn't hear it talked about as often in the like online Islamic space and in the world. So I would find myself relying on other sort of insights and
Ah,
like discussions. And then that felt even more confusing and messy too. So I think just reconciling between dunya and deen and all these things are super important, and you
yeah,
need like that discussed, because then I find myself getting lost if it's not already being talked about.
yeah. You're so right that you put it perfectly. It's yeah, I think also maybe because we're women and culturally speaking, a lot of people assume that Muslim women, they're not supposed to earn money. That's not our part. Nothing in Islam forbids you of earning money. There's this say, that my husband's money is our money and my money is my money. That is how Islam works. Obviously, that doesn't mean that you need to be completely selfish when you're married and, not not buy anything or contribute in any way. But I think it says a lot about how much freedom we actually have when it comes to being Muslimas. So yeah, I love that you mentioned that. I completely agree.
Alhamdulillah. Well, I'd love to kind of talk about, as we kind of close out our conversation, building an online presence has you making personal choices. It has you making like professional choices. So many different things go behind it. And some of that talk, that like tension lies in privacy, but sharing, like privacy sharing, privacy sharing. So how do you navigate that line, that fine line between authenticity and what you're sharing, but then also maintaining your own personal boundaries as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I also loved that question because that was something that was so important for me from the start of the account. Um, I'm a huge YouTube consumer. I grew up with YouTube. I told you I had a YouTube channel when I was younger. I grew up with vlogs, where people were sharing their whole lives. And for a long time, I thought, I want to do that. But, I was always too busy with my studies and everything. Um, and when I started the page, I knew that I wanted to share my story, but I knew that because of everything that I was seeing with bloggers and content creators on social media, I was like, I'm not sure that I want my whole life to be my job, It's like I feel like you kind of start to disconnect yourself from your reality in a way. It's like you're going to go on a brunch with your friends, and this is going to be content, instead of a memory or a moment. And that was very disturbing to me. And it's funny because when I was 20, I remember my friends, because I was so connected and always um like sharing my trips and stuff like this and checking Instagram and stuff. They made fun of me. They were like, she's always on her phone, like, like that's they even created a verb based on my name for when you're always on your phone. That was so funny. And now I turn out to be the one that doesn't even get her phone out of her bag, because I'm just like, yeah, this is not the time for that. I want to be in the present moment, and I'm not really sure this is bringing any value to my community. It can be like a way to, every now and then to show that, you're a normal person, you go on with your life. I do have a page in French as well where, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot, but it's been fun because obviously French people are going to like interact, and they can relate to things that people all over the world cannot necessarily relate to. But even then, sometimes I will share like, oh, I went to this place, it was fun. I highly recommend it to you guys. But I would not do it in the present moment and share everything about my life, because I I feel like that's not really healthy. Um, I'm not sure, and I don't want to say like this is. I hope this won't come across as me criticizing anyone, but even Islamically speaking, I'm not sure that showing everything about your life makes sense. I feel like when you're Muslim, modesty and humility are so important, and not being ostentatious and sometimes we were talking about financial like goals and everything. It's like I feel like there's balance in this as well. And so I feel like oversharing your wealth and everything you've achieved isn't something that is necessarily going to be good for you or your audience. And that was something that I was being mindful of as well. I'm not wealthy in any way, but in different aspects, because I thought um I I don't want people to, first of all, I don't want to have evil eye, like to get struck by evil eye, but also just people to feel bad about themselves because this is the life that I have and they don't have it. Same with just showing a lot of the things that you have. I understand that some people, they do it with an intention to inspire, like I did it, so you can do it too. But let's be honest, like, social media, obviously you can grow very fast, but there's also so many people who are trying to do influencing and content creation, and it doesn't work out because in order for you to be consistent in creating content and choosing this career, you need to love what you do. You need to love creating content. If you're doing it for the fame and the follower account and the money that comes with it, you're not going to be successful because you're not going to be authentic. People are not going to, get attached to the person that you are. And alhamdulillah, subhanallah, at first I was afraid that people wouldn't see the person that I am because I was being private. But subhanAllah, when I see the messages of my community, some people have been following me since I was like I had 100 people, like in the community. When you see messages from them now, and they're like, "I'm so happy of how you've grown, yet alhamdulillah stay the same." I cannot be more grateful, So yeah, it's like very I feel like this is important, to just preserve yourself even from a very personal level, for your mental health, just not everything being a work, it's you deserve to have a break and enjoy time with your family, time by yourself, time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala,
Mm.
it's so essential. Um, so yeah.
Mm. Love it. Alhamdulillah. I like that. I like that you don't need, and I think it's a personal constant thing that you have to remind yourself is like you are not sharing something or putting yourself out there for certain reasons. Because
Yeah.
when you do not remind yourself, because then it becomes easy to start putting out things, and then years later, maybe even months later, you're like, why did I do like why did I put that out there? Because then once it's out there in the digital world, it's out there. Even if you remove it, you like you don't know what that content is going to be utilized or shared or saved or downloaded for.
Yeah. Or even how it impacted the life of
Yeah,
someone, at
yeah,
that instant moment when they saw the content and
mm,
consumed it. We don't know what they ended up
mm,
thinking. And it's kind of
mm,
sad, when someone sees your content and they don't feel good about themselves. That
mm,
is something that would break my heart. If my content doesn't make you happy, it's
mm,
just I would always say unfollow me, or like I don't mind people unfollowing me. I feel like if that makes you feel better, then all good. But it's yeah, you're right. It's so important to remind yourself of your why you're doing this.
mm. And, these last few questions that I have are mainly just takeaway reflections, right? Like lessons learned here. And so the first one that I had is generally speaking, right? In this world of digital media and things, how can Muslim entrepreneurs contribute positively in this online space and promote, right ethical behavior within their communities? So from like afar, what would you say? How can they go about doing so?
Honestly, my first advice would be to, it's very cliche, but be authentic, be yourself. Um, if again, the reason for starting content creation needs to be pure as well. Like maybe you want to find yourself a community that you feel safe with, that you can share what you care about and your improvement with, so you can just grow together. There's something very special about having people that you go to online, and sometimes you see also familiar faces, and they tell you like, oh, like I started wearing hijab, or I started praying again. It's honestly, it's very humbling. Like when this happens, I cannot thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough. Um, that is obviously if you are thinking about doing Islamic lifestyle, but generally speaking, just making sure that your intentions when you're going to start is to remain yourself. Don't try to be someone else. Or as well, there's something that I should have mentioned before, but we see a lot of people starting content creation and they purely copy other people instead of getting inspired by. And I don't feel like this is serving anyone, not yourself, not your community, not like it's not fair to the first person that created the content. So, yeah, just be yourself, understand why you want to get into this. I think it's also important to keep in mind the things that are hard about it. We are talking about social media. We all know how toxic it can be because of the addiction that it creates with the dopamine rushes and everything, because of the hate that you can face. So it's important to know what you're getting yourself into and knowing your mission with it. Why are you doing this? And I think this is honestly the main advice that I would give. It takes time, so we need to be aware of that and just to spend this time very wisely.
Hmm. I love it. And then, so speaking of, what about any advice for aspiring Muslim entrepreneurs who want to just enter this world? You kind of talked about just authenticity, but maybe what would you say to those aspiring people who are just diving into their journey of digital branding and online entrepreneurship? How can they, how do they navigate that? How do they stick true to their beliefs and principles?
I think it's good to, start with a brainstorm of the things that you want to be part of your brand, like something that people, when they think of you, this is what they think about. So, for example, when it comes to my page, a lot of people would say, talk about sustainability. Your feed is color coordinated. Like, there are so many things that people know about the account that are part of it and makes it what it is. Like the notes to self that I just mentioned. So it's like think of like brainstorm a few ideas of things that you would like to be part of your brand that make you you, but still, are like will catch the attention of people. Be consistent. Um, if people see you every like once a month, they're not going to get attached. Think about it as a proper relationship, you know, and don't see it just as your followers. That is something I hate saying that. For me, they're not my followers, they're my community. And I think when you have that mindset, you're just going to really pour your heart into your work and what you offer to your community. So these are the two things. And then the third is just do what you love. If there are things that you really want to talk about, or that even if they're not as popular, or just do it. Like this is like if you think about it, this is your page, and it's important to not obviously you the more you are going to grow, the more you will like to create content that your audience like as well. But if you're only doing it for the sake of pleasing others, then you're going to lose the purpose and it's not going to feel like your page anymore. So, yeah, just think about the things that you love, think about the things that you love creating content about, whether it is filming it or taking pictures or writing, whatever. Think about this and yeah, just you won't know unless you try, so just go for it afterwards, it's like maybe it's gonna work, maybe you won't, and if it does, alhamdulillah, that means that it was meant for you, and if it doesn't, then it's okay. It means that there wasn't any good in it for you.
Hmm. Well said. I love it. And so, as we reflect on our conversation thus far, and generally on your journey, like, are there any specific experiences that stand out to you in your journey that can inspire others and guide others, other Muslimas who are aspiring to kind of make their mark in this world of the online digital community, content creation, all these things? Anything that you would want to share that kind of has been shaped from your own experience?
Honestly, maybe two things. I think the first one, is just your audience being so supportive of what you do is going to inspire you to do other things. When I started, for me, it was like I want this to be, just this page that people go to and lifestyle tips from someone that they relate to. And then people started to tell me, "Can you please do a podcast? Can you please do a podcast?" And at first I was like, I'm not sure I will bring any value if I do a podcast and just talk about my life. And then I realized that the more I was working on my post and talking to people, that there was a need to talk about health, health and faith and how they work together and how they influence each other, and especially not just physical health but also mental health, which we need more people to talk about online. And so when I thought about this, I was like, this is what I need to do. If I'm doing a podcast, this is the podcast that I'm doing. And subhanAllah, the podcast has been such a great project that I never thought I would do. I was the kind of person that would consume podcasts. Then, I just was like, yeah, doing my thing. And everyone is doing podcasts as well. I was like, I don't want to feel like I'm doing a podcast just because everyone is doing it. if I'm not bringing any value, then I won't do it. And subhanallah, this has been one of the most fulfilling projects that I've done. It made me grow. The conversation was so insightful. And subhanallah, the more you are sincere with your your audience and the content you create, the more opportunities are going to come to you, whether it is brand partnerships that you never thought would happen, whether it is new projects that you never thought you would launch. And it just makes you also learn a lot about yourself. So that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing I would say is that if it is within, again, the Muslim community, whatever you decide to do, um, it's easy again to focus on the negative things and how sometimes we lack sisterhood and brotherhood. But honestly, if you care about your community, they are going to give it back to you. And this is actually a touching story. And sometimes I feel like I don't thank my community enough for that. But when I heard that my dad was sick, um, he we he was in debt, you know, and he had cancer, and I thought I don't want him to die with his debts. And I shared that I we did a fundraiser, and I was so blown away. I was so blown away. I will never forget this. And to this day, there isn't a salah that I don't make dua for my community, because I cannot forget. And people, they were right to me, and they were like, "You've done so much for me, then I cannot not participate in that." And for me, that was so surreal, because I'm not minimizing my work, but sometimes you're like, yeah, just post content online. But you're not just posting content online. You're going to influence the life of someone, and maybe they're going to need you at a certain time, and they're never going to forget you. And I feel like, maybe this is cheesy, I'm not sure, but social media can be very toxic and everything. But sometimes when you get back to what it is made for, aka like easing the link between people, then you find yourself facing a lot of humanity. And this thing I will never forget. And to this day, I feel so blessed to have people online that I have never met, who know me, but I don't really know them, and yet still supporting me, maybe even more than people that I've known for years. So honestly, if you do this, if you get into content creation with a pure heart and good intentions, then beautiful things can happen to you, inshallah.
Inshallah. I love it. Subhanallah. And as we close out our conversation today, I love asking this one particular question to my guests, because I learn so much from their reflections. What is a lesson learned that you know now that you wish you could have told your younger self?
Oh, that's the question that I always ask other people, and I never tell myself this question. There's so many things I would tell her, but honestly, the one thing that really comes to my mind is, don't underestimate what Allah has in stock for you. You might think you know what is good for you. Um, you might be super hard on yourself and everything, but when you place your trust in Him and you go back to Him and you hold on to His rope, it's crazy how your not just your life, but even the way you think about things changes. Even the way you perceive your emotions. It's like, let's say you are going to be sad because I'm thinking about my 19-year-old self who didn't get into med school, and I had failed the exam twice, so it was really, really hard on my self-confidence. And I was 20 actually, but anyway. And I was so hard on myself. And I thought, yeah, Allah has given up on me. Like, why isn't I worked so hard and I didn't get in? Why did He do this to me? And in hindsight, I know that I was just not mature enough, and my faith wasn't as strong as it is now. But subhanAllah, I would tell her, if I had to meet her now, I would tell her, don't worry. What He has in stock for you is so much better than everything you are thinking right now. Like, obviously we are humans and we think we know better and what is good for us. But honestly, when things don't work out, just say Alhamdulillah. Like, what is coming is so much better. So I think that's what I would tell her.
Well, alhamdulillah for everything. You just gotta trust the best of planners, tawakkul, and you know, Just let it happen. Let it happen. Obviously, put in your best foot forward, and alhamdulillah for everything. And thank you so much. Alhamdulillah for you joining us. Today's conversation was amazing. You know, we unpacked the ethics of entrepreneurship as Muslimas, and I think it's such a critical conversation to continue, to kind of further, to keep talking about it, so that other people can benefit from that. So thank you again, Assia, for joining us all the way online from France. So I appreciate it. And I wish you the absolute best as you kind of continue and navigate this online journey
Likewise.
as well.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I want to just add that there's still so we could spend hours talking about this, and obviously today was more a focus on also the digital world. When it comes to entrepreneurship, there's so much things to say and so many things to improve. So I hope that if there's any entrepreneurs listening right now, that it can still, even if we didn't dive specifically into what you are doing, that it still inspires you, to just get into it and educate yourself, because Islam has a ruling for everything, honestly. And when you start to search, you realize that we're so far from the right path. But the more we try, the easier Allah makes it for us. So yeah, I hope this. If there's anything, it's like a small disclaimer.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Small disclaimer, of course, and perhaps maybe another time we dive deeper
Yeah, inshallah.
into beyond just the digital aspect. So, listeners, thank you again for tuning in. Today's episode was all around entrepreneurship within the world of content creation and digital branding and marketing, specifically in the online digital realm. Thank you again, and inshallah, I'll catch you on another episode of Coffee Chats with Aisha. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.